The scream that pierced through the airplane cabin wasn't one of turbulence or panic, it was the raw, primal cry of a father watching his entire world crumble. Marcus Chen had built an empire worth billions, commanded boardrooms across 3 continents, and never once shown vulnerability in public. But 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, clutching his chest as searing pain radiated down his left arm, the untouchable CEO was just another man facing his mortality. "Daddy." 8-year-old Lily's voice cut through the chaos as passengers turned in their first-class seats, some reaching for their phones, others frozen in shock. Her small hands shook as she tried to steady her father, who had collapsed sideways, his breathing shallow and labored. "Daddy, please don't leave me." The flight attendant rushed over, her training kicking in as she called for medical assistance over the intercom. But in that critical moment, as the aircraft hummed its steady course toward London, it wasn't a doctor who stepped forward. Oh, it was Tom Rodriguez, a construction worker heading home to Wisconsin after visiting his ex-wife and their twin boys. Tom had been trying to ignore the commotion, focused on the crumpled job rejection letter in his lap. 3 months without steady work, mounting bills, and custody payments he couldn't afford had worn him thin. His calloused hands, stained with years of honest labor, seemed out of place among the leather seats and crystal glasses of first class, or a seat he'd only gotten through a mix-up at the gate that he hadn't had the heart to correct. When he saw the little girl's terrified face, something inside him shifted. His own boys were the same age as this frightened child, and he knew that look of desperate helplessness. Without hesitation, Tom unbuckled his seatbelt and knelt beside Marcus's seat. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said softly to Lily, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "My name's Tom. I'm going to help your dad. Okay?" He'd learned basic CPR during his construction safety training, never imagining he'd use it on a billionaire at 30,000 feet. Marcus's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his usually sharp gaze. "Lily?" he wheezed, reaching weakly for his daughter's hand. "She's right here," Tom assured him, checking his pulse while the flight attendant prepared oxygen. "You're having what looks like a heart attack, but we're going to take care of you. Just focus on breathing." For the next 40 minutes, Tom became Marcus's lifeline. He monitored his vital signs, kept him conscious with gentle conversation, and most importantly, comforted Lily with stories about his own children while they waited for the emergency landing in Halifax. He held the little girl's hand when her father's breathing became more labored, sang her a silly song his boys loved when the fear threatened to overwhelm her, and promised her that everything would be okay. As the plane descended rapidly toward the Canadian airport, Tom noticed something that made his heart sink. Marcus's medical bracelet revealed a rare blood type and multiple drug allergies, so information that could mean the difference between life and death at the hospital. When Marcus briefly regained clarity, he grabbed Tom's wrist with surprising strength. "If something happens to me," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the engine noise, "promise me you'll make sure Lily's okay." She only has me." Tom looked into the eyes of a dying man, and not a CEO, not a billionaire, just a father terrified of leaving his daughter alone in the world. "Nothing's going to happen," Tom replied firmly. "But if it did, I give you my word, she won't be alone." The emergency landing was textbook perfect, but the next few hours blurred together in a whirlwind of paramedics, hospitals, and sterile waiting rooms. Tom stayed by Lily's side throughout the ordeal, calling his own ex-wife to explain why he'd miss his weekend with the twins, sleeping in an uncomfortable hospital chair, and reading her stories from his phone when she couldn't sleep. Marcus survived the surgery, a barely triple bypass at 42, the cardiologist explained, likely triggered by months of stress, poor diet, and a genetic predisposition he'd never known about. When he finally woke up 3 days later, The first face he saw wasn't a business associate or board member, but Tom Rodriguez, who was teaching Lily how to make paper airplanes with hospital napkins. "You stayed," Marcus said, his voice hoarse but stronger. Tom shrugged, embarrassed by the gratitude in the other man's eyes. "Told you she wouldn't be alone." What Marcus learned next changed everything he thought he knew about success and worth. Tom had used his last $300 of money meant for his own children's Christmas gifts to buy Lily new clothes and toys during her hospital vigil. He'd slept in waiting rooms, lived on vending machine food, and called in every favor he had to extend his stay in Halifax. When asked why, Tom simply said, "Because it was the right thing to do." But Marcus dug deeper. Through private investigators and careful inquiries, he discovered the full scope of Tom's sacrifices. The man who had saved his life was facing eviction, had pawned his father's watch to make a custody payment, and had turned down a job interview, one that could have changed his family's future, to stay with a stranger's daughter in a foreign hospital. The realization hit Marcus like another heart attack. He had spent his entire adult life accumulating wealth and power, believing that success was measured in stock prices and profit margins. Yet here was a man worth more than Marcus had ever been, despite having almost nothing in his bank account. 6 months later, Tom Rodriguez stood in the marble lobby of Chen Industries, wearing an ill-fitting suit and clutching a business card that still felt surreal in his hands. Executive Vice President of Operations seemed like words from someone else's life. But Marcus had insisted that the man who had shown him what true character looked like deserved a chance to build something meaningful. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, walking up behind him. His recovery had been remarkable, aided by a complete lifestyle change and a new perspective on what mattered most. "Terrified," Tom admitted with a laugh. "I'm not sure I belong in a place like this." "That's exactly why you do," Marcus replied. "You understand something most people in suits never learn, that business is about people, not just profits." As they walked toward the executive offices, Lily came running down the hallway, her backpack bouncing as she headed to the company daycare that Marcus had installed after his heart attack. She hugged Tom's legs enthusiastically, chattering about her day at the on-site school he had also created. "Uncle Tom, Daddy said we're going to your boys' baseball game this weekend." "That's right, kiddo," Tom said, ruffling her hair. "They can't wait to meet you." Marcus watched the interaction with a smile that had become more frequent since Halifax. His company was more profitable than ever, but now it also paid living wages, offered comprehensive health care, and provided educational opportunities for employees' children. The changes hadn't hurt the bottom line, they'd strengthened it, proving that caring for people was good business. But the real transformation wasn't in the company, it was in Marcus himself. The man who had once measured success by how many people he could intimidate now found joy in simple moments. Reading bedtime stories to Lily, attending Tom's boys' soccer games, and building genuine friendships with people who valued character over wealth. That evening, as they sat in Tom's backyard watching their children play together, Marcus reflected on how a single act of kindness had altered the trajectory of multiple lives. Tom's selflessness hadn't just saved Marcus's life, it had given him a new purpose, shown him what true success looked like, and reminded him that in our darkest moments, we discover who we really are and who we want to become. "You know," Marcus said, watching Lily teach the twins how to make paper airplanes, "I used to think that helping people was a luxury I couldn't afford. Now I realize it's the only investment that truly matters." Tom smiled, his weathered hands wrapped around a beer that cost less than Marcus used to spend on lunch. "My grandmother used to say that we're not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we give away when we have nothing left to give. As the sun set over the modest neighborhood that Marcus now visited more often than his penthouse, he understood that his collapse on that airplane hadn't been his ending, it had been his beginning. Sometimes it takes losing everything we think matters to discover everything that actually does.